to Get Smart with Sarah. We are now on chapter 3. Contraceptives, aka how not to repeat and make more of yourself. So just a reminder for anyone who hasn't been with us or hasn't been with us for a little bit. If you have questions, you can always put them in the chat. If you're not really comfortable putting them in the chat, you can DM me. And then also that, I use like some vulgar language and I use some cringe humor sometimes, but also that the purpose of this is not actually to be cringe. So just, keep that in mind. It's just to make it entertaining for the purposes of being, to help you guys learn and to help this stick better in your heads. Anyway, this is what we're doing today. So we're going to go over the history of it. So we're going to literally roast Candace Owens, literally directly what she was fucking talking about. We're going to go over kind of like why you would choose between different contraceptives, and then we'll go over the different methods. So what not to do and what to do. Yeah. So these are some of the key terms to kind of know about today. So contraceptives, birth control, STI protection. The difference between, I guess, protection of STIs, aka sexually transmitted infections, versus pregnancy protection. So they're two different things, and it's important to know the difference between them and what does what. Outer course. It's a word. We're gonna learn what that means. Period control. We're gonna learn what that is. Hormonal birth control. And sterilization. Candace just used that word a whole lot, so we're gonna talk about that too. First up, we're going to talk about the history. Actually, very, very first, I'm going to go back a little bit to this first word, contraceptives. First of all, what does contraceptive, like the actual word, even mean? So we kind of remember conception, I hope, a little bit from the first chapter. The definition of conception is, again, specifically conception is when sperm and the egg join together in the fallopian tubes. Pregnancy, in contrast, is when we have the fertilized egg implanting in the uterine wall and starting to develop. That's like pregnancy, that's implantation. Conception, specifically, is that moment of the egg and the sperm joining together. That is the conception. So, contraception, the word contraception, contra means against. So, contraception literally means just against conception. So that's where we get the word contraception from. It just means against conception, because contra means against. There you go. Anyway. Okay, now on to the history. Yeah, so pretty much everything has been a struggle, especially when it relates to like women's healthcare. So we hate this guy. So before 1930 in the United States, everything was pretty much banned relating to information about contraceptives. And this was all due to this one motherfucker named Anthony Comstock. We hate him. He was a right-wing... Sorry?
Can we call him Anthony Comstock?
You may call him whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah, baby!
He was a right-wing radical who thought that all information was bad and wrong, and he made an act, which was like a series of a whole bunch of laws, and it made it illegal to distribute anything relating to devices and information, even in print, so relating to STIs and STDs. And also just to clarify the difference kind of between STIs and STDs. So STI refers to sexually transmitted infection. STD refers to sexually transmitted diseases. All sexually transmitted diseases are sexually transmitted infections. Infection is like the bigger umbrella word, and I prefer to use the word sexually transmitted infection, to be honest, just because I find that like... So first of all, yeah, not all of them are diseases, but they are all infections. Only some of them are diseases. But also I think that disease is like a bit more stigmatizing, because it's like you're diseased, I guess. So like I guess I am in general gonna use STI in the future, but that is the technically the difference between them. Anyway, just in case you're wondering. But yeah, he also made it a crime for it to appear in print. And more importantly, doctors and nurses were not allowed to discuss this with patients, which was fucking huge because if you had like a patient who had visible STI symptoms, like syphilis or something, that meant that doctors and nurses can educate them on their symptoms or get them help for their symptoms, which is enormous. And anyone in violation of these could be arrested and imprisoned. And Comstock actually arrested people himself because he was an asshole. So the rhythm method, which we will kind of discuss in a bit more detail later on, because there is actually kind of a version of the rhythm method that does kind of work, especially when it's combined with other forms of birth control. However, the version of the rhythm method that they had, which relates to like essentially timing intercourse for the days when you're like not ovulating, which technically I guess would be like when you're least likely to get pregnant, ideally. But because they had no information available, the rhythm method was very misunderstood. And they were doing it very wrong. And essentially, they were doing it on the days when they were most likely to get pregnant. So it was bad. Anyway, here's a little interpretation of Anthony Comstock. Yep. However, thankfully, we do have this woman who Candace Owens really fucking hates in the United States that, thanks to her, there was this big concentrated effort to make the Comstock Act, to change it a little bit and make it less restrictive and to make contraceptives more widely available for everyone. And we're going to talk about her on the next slide. Thank you. And she also is who coined the phrase birth control. She's the one who came up with it. Also, but before we talk about her, I'm going to finish talking about the Comstock Act and its relevance today, though, because it unfortunately does have quite a lot of relevance today. So it still exists today. We didn't actually fully get rid of it. So it's basically been amended and narrowed down in terms of its scope and its reach so many times that in terms of how it's used right now, it only really is used to apply to child pornography. And for like a very long, it's kind of because for a very long time, the only way to prosecute child pornography was under obscenity laws, or obscenity charges, I should say. However, right now it's being discussed today as another way to maybe curtail abortion because anti-abortion activists are saying like you can it's federal legislation, so they might be able to, amend it again and change it kind of back to similarly to how it was, make it more restrictive, and it might be a way to stop abortions without introducing any new federal legislation. So they could amend the existing legislation or restore it, which is alarming. In 2023 of January, J.D. Vance, who was at the time a senator, signed a letter along with a bunch of other colleagues in the Senate supporting the application of the Comstock Act to abortion-related articles such as abortion pills. Online, we have the Heritage Foundation Project 2025, or Project 2025, has a section on abortion access that indirectly refers to the Comstock Act as federal laws that prohibit the distribution of abortion drugs by postal mail. So we'll talk a lot more about abortion when we get into like conception, ironically, and kind of like, I don't know what people's thoughts and stuff are, but we'll get into like why. I mean, we know why access. This is kind of why access to like reproductive stuff is important and reproductive rights, and this is why access to birth control is important. But we'll talk more on, I guess, abortion specifically in a different chapter. Anyway, but that is how it is being used. It's being brought up right now again. So it is pretty fucking relevant, unfortunately. Margaret Sanger. So this is Margaret Sanger. So she was a nurse who was a mother of three and moved to New York City and started becoming involved in. She does mock ComSec. I know, she really does. So this was at the same time in the early like 1915, 1916. That's when the same time the suffragette movement was kind of taking off in America. So she was starting to get involved in the women rights movement, the suffragettes, that kind of stuff was all happening. And socialist politics. Oh no, it's 66, not 96. Okay, so minus 30 years. 66, not 96, guys. Anyway, sorry. Um,
Damn. You think
but
you
yeah,
know
she
what
started to get like super woke, and then she was like, I think that women's freedom depends on their choices about their personal and basically, when you do not control, I mean, think about it. Pregnancy takes away a huge fucking amount of your freedom. If you do not have like the freedom to make choice about your reproductive life, you are not having the choice to make in your personal and your sexual lives because that all goes hand in hand. She started publishing articles about her sexuality and the woman's right to control her own reproductive body. Basically, she was saying that women can have sex and also that women are entitled to sexual pleasure,
someone
which
ping
was
me so
like
I could find it.
really fucking radical at the time. That like separating sex from pregnancy, like you can have sex for the purpose of like not getting pregnant, which was a crazy thought at the time. Yeah, poor girl. Anyway, I will keep in mind. Oh yeah, I'm not fully done with it yet, actually. Anyway, so at one point she had obscenity charges for talking about contraception because, of course, she did because of Comstock's Act. But in 1915, Comstock died. Thank God. So she had moved to Europe in about 1914, the Netherlands, to avoid, or England actually, sorry, to avoid arrest because she had all these obscenity charges against her. And she visited this birth control clinic in the Netherlands, and she saw they were testing a very, very early version of the diaphragm, which we will talk about soon. And they were testing this on patients, and she saw this, and she was like, "Holy shit, that's awesome!" And then so Comstock had died. He was dead. I mean, she still had the charges against her and stuff, but like fucker was dead. So she went back to New York in 1916, and went to her trial and stuff. And she did have to spend like 30 days in jail, I think. But she opened the very first birth control clinic in New York. And again, it was raided by the police after, within 2 weeks of operation, and she was arrested. But this got her a lot of publicity, and that led to her being more celebrated. And by 1916, she'd sold over 100,000 copies of her first booklet on contraceptives, and birth control clinics started to open regularly. And then by the late 1950s, with her funding between her and other women and a couple researchers, one of them, I think two of them were from Harvard, actually, Harvard University. I don't know if you guys know Harvard University. It's like this kind of famous. I don't know. Anyway.
Never heard of Harvard University.
Oh, okay.
Sounds
Okay,
kind of
cool.
lame.
Anyway, yeah, she had, so yeah, the first hormonal contraceptive pill was developed through efforts through her funding and a bunch of other people. And we're about to go into some of the horrible history of birth control, and you'll see like why that is so fucking impressive too, based on like what we used to have. And she is considered to be one of the original founders of Planned Parenthood, which is an awesome organization. I will talk about them. Actually, I use them as a resource for a lot of this because my textbook's from 2016. So in terms of like I wanted to find something more up to date for actual birth control because we've had more updates to birth control since 2016. It's been nearly a decade now. So I went right to the Planned Parenthood site, and they had a very, very well-researched list. So I give them full credit for that. Horrible historical methods. Whee. Oh yeah, actually one last thing to mention. So yeah, the butt. I had the butt here. Unfortunately, a lot of early birth control supporters were eugenicists. That was the but, and that was why Candace Owens was mentioning like sterilization and stuff. They weren't like the notion that they got into birth control for sterilization purposes is insane. Um, I love that she's putting that nice little spin on it. That is completely incorrect. And also to keep in mind, we have to look at this through the if you don't know what eugenics are, it's the thought that certain people shouldn't have children because they shouldn't pass down their genetics. Oftentimes eugenics is like, it goes hand in hand with racism, because it's like, you shouldn't have children, and it's also hand in hand with ableism too. But I want to also say, keep in mind, this is the early 1900s. This is like 1916. Almost everyone thought this at the time, and it was a very common, like this was pretty fucking common. Alexander Graham Bell, the inventor of the telephone, thought this, and his wife was blind, and he was a huge proponent of eugenics. And he didn't want to have children with his wife because he knew that they had a very good chance to have blind kids. Which I guess, that does make sense from, their perspective, and that is a thing that people choose to do a lot of the time, is, if you have a bad hereditary, disorder or disease or something, you choose not to have children. But the whole point is, that's a choice, and taking that choice away from people is, a huge breach of human rights and stuff, and we shouldn't fucking do that. But keeping in mind that this is 1915, and we did not have the view of human rights that we did then, and coming from, one oppressed group to another, and also seeing, probably horrific widespread poverty that you would be able to see in 1915, we have a lot of hindsight now that they did not then. And if you believe that certain traits were hereditary then you might believe in eugenics. Obviously, I'm fucking not. We know that eugenics is wrong and incorrect, and the racist roots of it are historically, just wrong in so many the but yeah, I think that's just important to look at through keeping the context of both, I guess, that no, that's not why she got into birth control, is to just try to get all women sterilized. That's not the case. Anyway, okay. Horrible historical methods. Back in 900 BC, ancient China, birth control people advised to swallow ancient tadpoles fried in mercury, which did kind of work. You wouldn't get pregnant. You would also get sterile because it was basically poison. Mercury is bad for you. Don't do that. So it would actually damage the woman's organs.
What's
and
wrong
maybe
with
kill them.
mercury? What's wrong with a little bit of mercury? Just a little sip.
Nothing. You should try it. Totally.
Yeah.
1500s. This is Canada. Beaver balls. As in testicles. Yep. 16th century Canadians would grind up beaver balls into a powder and drink it like a moonshine alcohol mix.
Do you do that still, Sarah?
No, not that I know of. 1725, Casanova, the well-known romance dude, talks about using half an empty lemon rind as a primitive cervical cap. So this would be shoving it up to prevent the sperm from... Anyway, we'll talk more about cervical caps, so you'll kind of see. I don't think it would work very well. The existence of the female, the eggs, were discovered only in 1827. And 5 years later, we decided to start injecting shit in China. Awful.
China, am I right?
Ugh. So yeah, a doctor in Massachusetts came up with this idea of mixing liquids with different things and just shooting them up there. So we had like a water-based solution of salt, vinegar, liquid chloride, zinc sulfite, and aluminum potassium sulfite. And this continued to be popular for the next 40 years. Oh my god. In the Great Depression, companies they obviously were not allowed to still use, because this was still, Comstock's laws were still pretty fucking popular in the 1930s. They were still active. So they weren't allowed to actually market them as contraceptives, so they'd use the term feminine hygiene. Lysol douche. We will discuss douching a little bit pretty quickly, actually. I think
they even have it in commercials too.
Yeah, this is bad. This is like really bad. Lysol does not belong in the vagina. And actually just douching in general is pretty bad, and we're gonna again go into like a little bit more detail very shortly, I think, in just a few slides here.
Yeah. I think one of the commercials goes, "I douche every day," or something like that.
Yeah. We do not advise on this. So in terms of like choosing an effective method of contraception, and we're gonna go through, I think, about 18 different methods of like actual effective methods. So we're not in like crazy detail, but we're gonna go through them. These are kind of some different factors to consider, and also obviously, presumably when you're having sex, this is between you and another partner or partners potentially. So if you're, it's often a shared decision. And it should be talked about, obviously, before you partake in intercourse. Like, this is something that needs to be talked about, especially in relation to STIs. And, like, I mean, obviously, pregnancy isn't always something that's on the table, especially if you're, if you're in a homosexual relationship, potentially pregnancy might not be, depending on, I guess, like cisgender, you might not have to worry about pregnancy in that case, right? Or if you're older, like people are, once you're of enough age, then people are past menopause, or people are no longer like you're sterile at some point, There's different factors that kind of come into play about like what kind of contraceptives should you be using. Yeah. So here are some of the things to think about. Am I having sex that involves risk of pregnancy or STIs? So yeah, am I having sex am I someone who can get pregnant? Like, do I have a uterus? Can I get pregnant? Am I having sex that will get someone potentially pregnant? So like, do I have a uterus? Yes? Okay, I can get pregnant. No? Okay, am I having sex with someone with a uterus? Yes? Okay. So yes, I'm having sex that involves a risk of pregnancy. If you're pretty much having sex at all, then you're having sex that involves a risk of STIs. There you go. Am I in a trusting monogamous relationship in which both of us are free of STIs? That's different. Then maybe you might not need to worry so much about preventing STIs. You might just need to worry about preventing pregnancy. Like, that is something to consider. Another thing to consider, like, if you are more frequently having sex, you're at higher risk for both pregnancy and STIs, potentially. Or if you want to have sex with multiple partners, you're definitely at higher risk for STIs, for sure. Almost certainly for sure. So those are all, like, different things to keep in mind. So basically it's like, do I want to protect against pregnancy? Do I want to protect against STIs? Do I want to protect against both? Or like, are we having heterosexual sex, or any sex involving transmission of fluids or close contact, aside from like either full latex or glory holes, I assume. But yeah, I mean, again, if you cannot discuss and agree about contraceptives with your partner, you should not have intercourse with that person. But then again, a lot of people are not in stable relationships, and sometimes that conversation doesn't kind of come up sometimes as much. And like in cases like that, sometimes people come prepared. So like people have condoms on them, or people are on birth control pill, or people already have like one of the methods that we'll discuss coming up. So like there's kind of things you can do to kind of have stuff on hand, I guess, too. Anyway. Okay, unreliable methods. Douching! So this is like vaginal douching, just to be clear to you. So this is when you flush the vagina with water or douching solution. Gravity. Sort of, not gravity. Physics, I should say. This isn't gravity. Yeah, this can push the sperm further up to where you don't want it to go. Actually, you don't really want to do this at all because this can force bacteria further up towards and like into, especially like around your urethra area. This can push bacteria into the female urethra, which we don't want. So Coca-Cola actually can be lethal to sperm. It will not kill all the sperm, first of all. So that's just step number 1, is it does not kill all the sperm. Number 2, it is not good for the vagina. Like, it's not good for the pH of the vagina. It is not. Just don't. Just don't. I don't know why anyone would think this is a good thing to put up the vagina. Just don't.
I remember there was like a podcast where they didn't have like a condom, so instead they used like they used a empty Snicker bar wrapper.
God. Something similar is about to come up, actually. Standing up during intercourse. Yeah, sperm can swim in any direction.
They
up
swim
or
They
down.
swim upwards like Minecraft.
With or against gravity. Yeah, I don't know why people think standing up can. Apparently, that is like a very common thing, which I think is really funny. Plastic wrap or candy wrapper, apparently. Yeah, that won't work. What the fuck? That will not fucking work. Do not do this. Please don't do this. Toothpaste is a spermicide, similar to Coca-Cola is a spermicide, except unlike Coca-Cola, toothpaste is not a spermicide at all, also.
I'm concerned, how did they come up with this?
I'm concerned too. Yeah, it doesn't work as a spermicide, and also would fucking hurt. Like, why would you? No. Awful. Just don't do that. Yeah. So yeah, the pregnancy is definitely possible your first time. You can get pregnant as soon as you're capable of ovulating. Points for whoever remembers what ovulation is. It's when an egg gets released from the fallopian tubes every month. It is. It's not a new egg, actually, because remember, girls like people that all the eggs are there actually from the beginning. All 400,000 of them to 500,000. So it's technically not a new egg. It's just released every time. But that was really good. I am impressed. Now here are 2 funny tweets I found online. In case you needed any proof that American sex ed needs to be greatly improved on, tonight a man told me that tampons are a form of birth control while explaining that birth control isn't medically necessary. Who can tell me why a tampon isn't birth control? I mean, I guess you can't really have sex while a tampon's in, but it's also not birth control.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is in the wrong hole.
Ah!
That's what Ambi said.
No, it's not!
Is this how we found out Ambi? Ambi.
What are you talking about? But yes, tampons are for periods. They don't. Tampons do go in the vagina, though. Yeah, it's not the wrong hole. That's why I'm a little concerned. It is the correct hole, actually. Okay. Anyway, second tweet. We need sex in schools because one time my classmate asked the instructor what would happen if a girl took all her birth control pills at once, if she would get super immunity to pregnancy, like when you get the star in Super Mario.
I think that's called overdose.
I don't think you can overdose. Actually, I don't know what would happen if you took all your birth control. I don't think it would be very good.
They haven't proved it yet.
I don't think you want to take that many hormones at once. I can't imagine that would be a good thing. I can't.
All right,
I can't
this is your
advise
homework
that.
for today.
No, don't do that.
As many birth controls as you can.
Okay, so now we're gonna go into different types of methods. So first, I do want to classify the difference between preventing STIs and preventing pregnancy. So not all methods can prevent STIs. All methods do help to work to prevent against pregnancy. That's why they're called birth control. What happens if a dude takes birth control? Well, first of all, some birth control is for dudes, like condoms, for example. Well, some types of condoms. And also most birth control is hormonal. Well, it depends. That's a great question. I guess we can find out. Let's find out. Oh, I'm spoiling some stuff. Let's find out when we get to the slide that explains it with the hormones. Like when we get to those slides. How about that? And I'll Google it together with us. Because I want to explain like what the hormones are and the distinction between them, and then we can look up the effect of the hormones. What if I eat a condom? I wouldn't do that. They're like it's made out of. We're gonna explain the different things condoms can be made out of. Anyway, so these are the. Oh my God! Stop it. How many holes? What holes are you counting? Name them. Name the holes, Ambi. Name the holes. Yeah, so some birth control helps prevent STIs. All of it does help to prevent pregnancy, but only some of it will prevent or will help to prevent STIs. Not everything is for sure. Again, we cannot, there's only one form that is for sure. Yes, condom. So, it is a, small thin paddle. This is the basic one. We kind of mostly know what condoms are. Did you know all three types of condoms, though? Did you know that there are three types of materials that condoms are made out of? Probably not. Anyway, the most common type is latex condom. So these are made from rubber. These are... One thing to note is that you cannot use oil-based lube with these because this will damage the condom. I'll tell you which one you can eat shortly, Blizzard. Don't worry. So this is made from, so only water-based or silicone lube only, not oil-based, because it will damage the condom. And what will happen if the condom is damaged, class?
Oh, baby time.
It'll break! It does not explode.
Results.
I don't know. Are condoms bad for the environment? Let me look it up. Probably. Are condoms bad for the environment? I would assume so, because, yeah, they're, plastic. Yep. They're non-biodegradable plastics, chemicals, and additives in their production contribute to landfill waste and ocean production. Yes, they are. There's also plastic condoms, because some people are allergic to latex. So nitrile, which is what, like, a lot of gloves for, like, medical gloves are made out of. Nitrile is pretty common for medical gloves now. And you can use water and silicone lube, and usually you can use oil-based lubes, but just check your condom package if you're wanting to use oil-based lubes. This is the type that you can eat, Blizzard. This is a lambskin condom. These are real. So these are made from the lining of animal intestines, usually sheep intestines, actually. These ones, big distinction though, this specific type of condom does not protect against STIs because there are little holes because it's made out of animal intestines. There's holes in it, technically, because it's like, made out of cells, right? They're small enough to block sperm, but they're not big enough to block bacteria. So they only protect against pregnancies, not STIs. And actually, this is what early condoms were made out of. They were animal skin. That's cool. Anyway, this is an animal skin condom. This is a historical animal skin condom from the late 1700s, but they've been found from even earlier. So this is like the earliest historical condoms were made out of sheep intestines. Fun fact. Cool, huh? Although, again, this wouldn't be the best for sexually transmitted diseases, but it was better than, what they had previously, so. And this is how to apply a condom. I just put it there because this is one of the most common methods of protection. But, yeah, you just want to, check the package, make sure the package is in one piece, make sure there's no rips or tears in it already. Nothing's been punctured.
One piece?
Yes, one piece straight up. Make sure you don't pin it to your wall with like a pin or anything. And then you want to make sure you have the rolls on the outside, not the inside. Like you gotta have the rolls there, like a little hat. And then you put the little hat on the guy, and then you squeeze the top of the hat. Love you too, babe. Bye. And then you pinch the hat because you got to make sure there's a little space for the little guys to come out when they shoot. You got to make sure there's a little room for the shooters. And then you just unroll it to the base. It does not need to cover the testicles. I think I read online, someone was like, I thought it had to stretch over the testicles. It doesn't need to stretch over the testicles. I don't know why you would do that. It just goes to the base. Anyway, yeah, so that is the male condom. So male condoms are thankfully very cheap. They're $0 to $2. They're 87% effective, so they're decent. You do need to use it obviously every time if you're using it. They are the reason, or actually, I'll talk more about efficacy in a second here. They can come flavored. They come sometimes like with like funny. Sometimes like there's like ribs on the inside and stuff. There's like some varieties. I don't know. Obviously, I'm not much of a condom user, so. But yeah, that's kind of the most basic one. The second is called an internal condom, and this is actually a female condom. Yes, flavored condoms. People will suck dick with condoms on, because one way you can get STIs is through oral sex as well, which would include, through oral, yes, like oral sex, as in sucking penis, or eating out vagina or vulva, for example. Anyway, this is the female condom.
There are flavored condoms for sure.
Yes.
Yes.
So yeah, there's also a female condom, which is lesser known because it's a little bit harder to use. But it works in terms of how it works. It's the same, but it just goes inside the vagina. There's only really one type, because again, it's not used as often, and it's a nitrile one. It only comes in one size because it just goes inside, and this is kind of how it works in terms of how it goes inside. So it just has it has like a little ring that is kind of more plasticky. It's still kind of bendy, but it has to kind of have like a little bit of firmness there, so you can kind of shove the rest up inside. But it has two rings technically, and this is what it looks like. So it's got an inner ring and an outer ring. And it's a little bit less effective. It's also just as cheap. You also have to use it every single time. I'll go through faster. I can go through a little faster if we want. The rest of these get a lot faster from past the condoms, to be honest. So, anyway, so the internal condoms are less effective because people use them less effectively, essentially. Most of the efficacy on the rest of these is because of incorrect usage. If you use these perfectly every time, the actual percentage is a lot closer to 95%. Also, these ones come, pre-lubricated, which is cool, I guess, but you can always use more lubrication if you need. Finally, we have one last method that protects against both pregnancy and STIs. And it's actually 100% effective, which is pretty cool. And it's actually free, which is extra cool. That's right, no sex! Also, I'm going to explain what outer course means. So, let me take a drink first. Abstinence. So for some people, abstinence means not doing any kind of sexual stuff with another person. And for some people, that means only vaginal stuff is not allowed. An outer course, in contrast, is defined as doing any or all sexual stuff aside from vaginal sex. So it's anything but vaginal sex. So that could be kissing, massage, masturbation, using sex toys on each other, dry humping, grinding. There are lots of ways to get sexual pleasure aside from vaginal sex. However, you could still possibly get STIs from outer course, I guess I should mention, if there's like skin-to-skin contact, or if your partner's sexual fluids potentially get anywhere. However, oral sex does not lead to pregnancy, and neither does anal sex. But oral sex and anal sex can both spread STIs. Obviously, only vaginal sex can lead to pregnancy. So this is birth control that helps with periods. So these are ones that all have an effect on a lady's period. So this is the birth control implant. This is what I have actually. So this is called Nexplanon birth control implant. It's a little rod that's implanted in your arm, and it just has progesterone. That's it. It's the best. It's actually listed on #1 for like ease of use, because it's super effective at preventing pregnancy, and you can just leave it in there and you don't have to do anything. So it's 99% effective. It is either mine was free, thank you Canada, or it can be a couple grand. Puts in by a doctor or nurse, and it can be mine lasts 3 years. It can also, some of them are up to 5 years. This is what it looks like. This is where it goes in the arm. Pretty cool. IUDs. These are really common. So this is an intrauterine device. This is like the second best type in my opinion. So it's like a little piece of plastic that goes inside the uterus, and there's 2 different types. And they both work pretty differently actually. So a hormonal IUD releases progesterone. So again, that is only has it basically just tricks your body into thinking you're pregnant. And I prefer that. I don't really want estrogen. I think progesterone only is better as a form of birth control. And a copper IUD works really interestingly. So copper IUD releases ions, and ions are charged particles. So it releases these charged ions, and the ions actually change the environment of the uterus to be anti-sperm. So copper IUDs basically just repel the sperm, and it's actually such an effective spermicide that the tails of the sperm fall off because of the copper IUD. However, copper IUD actually makes periods way worse. So I will say only the hormonal IUD in this case is the one that helps with periods. So only this one helps with periods. The copper one makes periods worse, but it is very effective at preventing pregnancy. So similarly, these also have to be put in by a doctor or nurse, but they do last several years, up to 3 to 12 years, depending on the type of IUD. And they're both 99% effective. However, in terms of ease of access, these ones obviously have to be put up your fucking vagina, which also means you have to be like dilated for it, as in like they have to use that fucking speculum thing, I think. I have heard some horror stories from people about getting these inserted, and personally, my insertion for this was super easy, and I would much prefer having something put in my arm than this. So for anyone with a uterus, I don't know, this was much. Anyone who knows anyone with a uterus, I don't know. Anyway, back to more periods. There's also the birth control shot. So this is an injection, and it's the same thing. It is literally just progesterone. It is just a progesterone shot. That is it. Super simple, super easy, 96% effective. You have to go in once a month or once every 3 months. And it adds up if you're not able to get it for free, because it's like $150 every time. But it's pretty simple otherwise. We also have the birth control vaginal ring. So this one's kind of crazy sounding. So it is kind of like a little thin donut looking thing, and you just put it in your vagina, and it's like a flexible ring, and it releases estrogen and progesterone. But this one is cool because it can be used to skip periods, which is interesting. So whoever wears this would need to replace it once a month. Yeah, but again, it's the only thing with this one is estrogen is not my favorite. Again, adding as a hormone, but it is kind of cool that you can use it to like skip a period. So it's not as like long term. You can kind of use it as like a temporary thing, which is cool. So what happens if a man were to use to inject progesterone suddenly? Progesterone is, so men like do have progesterone. It is produced by the testes. And what it does is it supports testosterone production actually, and it helps balance some estrogen. And helps mood regulation. So let's see, what would happen if a man took testosterone? Breast tenderness, increased appetite, weight gain, and decreased libido. Although it might potentially improve your mood and sleep and help your bone health, and might encounter some of the effects of excessive estrogen, which happens as men age. So it is a natural hormone though, and it's a precursor for testosterone. But anyway, yeah, wouldn't really recommend it. Yeah, this is what the ring looks like. Woo! It's just like a little flexible ring. And this is my little, I found like a little anti-sperm picture and put it on a syringe. We also have the birth control patch. So this is literally just like a thing you slap on. So it's just a patch. You can put it on your upper arm, belly, butt, or back. Estrogen and progesterone. Also pretty effective. 93% is a very high number. It does need a prescription, so like you would have to go to the doctor. Needs to just be changed once a week. Pretty easy to change. Then we have the birth control pill. So most of them do have estrogen and progesterone, but you can get progesterone only pills, which is cool. So also 93% effective, does need a prescription, and you have to take it once a day at a very specific time, which is very annoying. So I actually am not a huge fan of the birth control pill. I prefer other methods. Like, I mean, personally, I think mine is the best. In terms of things that are not STI preventative and prevent pregnancy and are easy, anything other than that, fuck. Anyway, here's the rest of the stuff. Some of these are kind of interesting and crazy. Diaphragm. So this is it's a cup, and you just shove it up your hoo-ha, and it covers the cervix. And you have to use it with spermicide. And, you know, as we kind of remember, spermicide kills sperm if they do manage to, you know, get up to the diaphragm. And that's it. So it is, you know, it can cost up to $75, but you keep it and you reuse it, which is, you know, interesting, I guess. But it is pretty effective. I think I beat the diaphragm, though. I'm pretty sure I'm someone who beat that shit. So, like, I'm one of the swimmers that got past that motherfucker, so. Then there's the birth control sponge, which is also pretty interesting. I think this is a bit better than the diaphragm, personally. Although it is a bit more wasteful because you can't, like, reuse it, I guess. But it's just a sponge that you, again, shove up the vagina that covers the cervix, and it's covered in spermicide. But it's a sponge, it's a bit more effective, it's cheaper, but also, like, you use it every time, but you can't reuse it. So it's a little bit different in that case. But it already comes with the spermicide, which is kind of nice, I guess. Then we have spermicide itself. So it comes in a few forms. It can come in like cream or gel or whatever. I know, seriously. And spermicide just refers to any type of birth control with chemicals that stop sperm from reaching an egg. So yeah, and you just would put it in the vagina before sex, ideally, to prevent pregnancy. It just kills the spermies. It's drugstores, pharmacies, over the counter. So there's a lot of different varieties, so it can huge price range, and you'd have to use it every time. And then last, or not quite last, but cervical caps. This is very similar to the diaphragm, but it looks a little bit different. It's kind of like a sailor's cap. It's smaller. It works a bit better. They're a bit more expensive, but it acts more like a plug, I think. Apparently they're a little bit more uncomfortable, but they work better. But it works the same way that a diaphragm does, and it comes again with spermicide. The main difference between the two of them is that you can leave the cervical cap in for longer. They both need to be taken out within a certain. You should never leave things up anywhere, but don't leave things up your vagina, obviously. So the diaphragm needs to be taken out within 24 hours. The cervical cap needs to be taken out within 48 hours. And also, they both need to be left in for a certain amount of time after having sex to make sure that they've effectively killed any sperm in there. So they have to be left in for 6 hours after having sex. There's their little spins. And last but not least, we have some lifestyle birth control options. So this kind of goes back to the rhythm method from the very beginning with Anthony Comstock. So the rhythm method was one of those only methods available to people for a very long time because of him. So this is tracking the menstrual cycle on fertile days to prevent pregnancy is what that means. So it's like oh, I'm on my period, that means I'm not gonna get pregnant right now, right? So we should have sex. Except again, they didn't actually have any understanding of this, so they were most likely having sex on the days when they were most likely to get pregnant, unfortunately. So there's a few ways you can track this, and it's best actually to use a combination of all these methods if people are going to try this. But checking your temperature daily, checking your cervical mucus, which is the discharge, and checking the menstrual cycle. This would be best in combination with birth control methods and not having sex on the days that you're ovulating. It can be super effective if you don't have sex and if you're not, and if you use birth control. It's free, but it's constant dedication. The pull-out method, don't do that. Just don't. Just don't. Yeah, pulling out just before ejaculation. This is like surprisingly, I don't want to use the term effective. I was surprised that it was 78% effective. But that means that 1 in 5 couples using this method will get pregnant within a year. So don't do that. Don't do that. Also, obviously, you can get STIs from this. So just like, don't do that. Interestingly enough, I wouldn't really call this a birth control method because the prerequisite for it is already having given birth. But breastfeeding, not all the time. Like this isn't for certain. I wouldn't rely on this. Also, again, this is just more of like an interest thing, I guess. When you breastfeed, most of the time, again, like not for certain, but like a majority of the time, you stop ovulating. So the egg is not released from the fallopian tubes, which means there's no egg to fertilize anymore. Which means you also don't have a period when you're breastfeeding, which is pretty cool. That's just because breastfeeding helps release certain hormones, which stop you from ovulating. And this lasts up to 6 months after birth. So this can actually be up to 98% effective. But again, it requires pregnancy and it only lasts for 6 months. So this is really not like a great method. And then this is the permanent methods. So we have sterilization. So this is female sterilization, tying the tubes. Tubal ligation is the fancy term for it. So they all have to do with removing or cutting pieces of the fallopian tubes. However, this method, menstruation still continues after. So just essentially when you cut off the fallopian tubes, it means that the eggs from the ovaries aren't able to, well, the sperm aren't able to reach them. Because they can't travel through the fallopian tubes to reach anything. So, and that's 99% effective. It's 99 because it's never 100% because there's still, because the uterus still exists and the eggs still exist, there's still a chance of something potentially happening. And like obviously if it involves like sometimes this does involve like removing the ovaries too. Obviously if they remove the ovaries, there's no eggs. So then it would be 100%. But if it's just removing pieces of the fallopian tubes, shit can still happen. You never know, right? A hysterectomy. This is not a normal recommendation for, this isn't just like, this is a very serious surgery. This isn't just given out like handy dandy, I guess. So this is when they remove the uterus and the cervix, and sometimes it does also include removing the ovaries and fallopian tubes, depending on why it's being recommended. It's usually recommended for things like cancer, severe like cysts, endometriosis, like severe endometriosis, like just bad shit, I guess. So it's not something that's just like done all the time. But this would be 100% effective. Why is this 100% effective, class? As opposed to the other type of female sterilization? Because it gets rid of the uterus. Thank you, Cam. Because if there's no uterus, there's nothing for a baby to grow inside. So it is literally impossible to get pregnant if there's no place for the pregnancy to occur in anymore. I mean, there's miracles of life, and I don't think that. And then there's that. And then last up, we have male sterilization, which is the vasectomy. So this is, as we should hopefully know pretty well by now, when they cut the vas deferens in the right by the bowels, the testicles. So this is the tube that carries sperm from the testicles to where it eventually joins with a bunch of other fluids and becomes semen. So this is where they just tie off the tubes or block them or cut them. And it's pretty simple. It's usually like done in office and you get to go home right away, and usually it's recovery pretty easy within a week. 99% effective. Again, like you never know, shit can happen. It is not like unheard of for vasectomies to fail, and also they can be reversible. But yeah, so that is it for sterilization methods. And remember, consent and communication are always super important when discussing sex and choosing methods of contraceptives. Yeah, so next week we're going to learn about STIs. So now we know how not to get STIs, hopefully. So yeah, basically, I guess the one thing to mention for condoms also is don't double up on condoms. Don't use 2 condoms at once. It's good to double up on your contraceptive methods. So like, using something like if you have someone who has an IUD or someone who has a birth control implant and you use a condom in addition to that, because that is a great way to protect against STIs and babies. You always want to protect, if you're having sex with someone you don't know very well, you always want to protect against STIs. And if you're not
Also,
sure
you look
that...
ridiculous.
Huh?
Too. It's like having 2 shields.
Exactly.
Basically. Yeah.
Yeah, you just want to make sure those shields like don't accidentally inactivate each other, because sometimes like 2 condoms would do that because 2 condoms cause friction, and friction will destroy the integrity of the condoms. So yeah, just some things to keep in mind. Thankfully Google is free, and there's lots of resources available online. But yeah, okay, let's do a Kahoot. I hope you guys are all paying attention.
I was busy drawing.
I knew it!